Hey everyone, welcome to March's NMRAx. It's Gordy here, and we're here with Thomas Gazer MMR. We're just having a few audio issues with Tom, um, so we're going to do the introduction. We're going to roll the video, and we'll fix Tom's audio issues in time to do a Q&A at the end. So Tom's clinic is on RipTrax, the prototype, modeling, and the operation of RipTrax. So Thomas has been an NMRA member for over 25 years. Now as a master model railroader. I had the privilege to be with Tom when he received his knighting with the length of flex track. He's been trying to build his layout since 2006, and he's now the proud owner of the Split Rock Mining Company, which you can see in the background there. He enjoys creating realistic photographs and videos of model trains and shares them on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. He might be working on the railroad. But he's not. He's here today, but so hopefully he doesn't get a call and get called out to the big railroad while we try and fix his audio. But he's now going to tell you what RIP stands for, or RIP stands for. So, speed, roll the tape.
Hello, everyone. I'm Thomas Gazer. Today's clinic will be on RipTrax. And I will show the prototype and how they do things. And then I will show how to model one and then how to incorporate it into your operations. So we'll look at the prototype and the ways to model it in HO scale and how to adapt a RipTrax to a variety of operations. And I'm going to repeat this mantra quite a bit, that you will want to add a RipTrax to your layout. It's very versatile. It has so many options that other industries do not. And this is a great addition to anyone's layout that they operate on. So the what and why. RIP stands for repair in place. These are fixing cars on a daily basis, the minor things that need fixing, from wheels to brakes, hand brakes, airlines, structural damage, replacing pin lifters and so forth, knuckles and drawbars. But it's basically on a daily basis the repairs of the little things that have gone wrong with a freight car. The prototype we'll be looking at is in South St. Paul, Minnesota. It's on the Union Pacific at Hoffman Yard. It is on the east side of the Mississippi River. It's a former Chicago Great Western Yard. And it serves a great size. It's a layout sized RipTrax. So here we see the location. And RipTrax are within yards, but they're away from live tracks. RipTrax goes from the lower left to the upper right. And then you can see the yard lead, and you can see the structure there where the mechanics are based out of in the yard office. But it's away from everything else where there's trains moving, being built, switched, but it's close enough that they can have access to the yard and get the cars in and out. High on the list is operational safety. A lot of blue flags are used, switch locks, and the safety of the area being clean and away from regular rail activities. And all the storage areas are marked and neat. And we'll start talking about that. But safety is a great thing to model. So here we have the blue flags, workers on tracks. These can only be removed by members of the same craft. Some say the same person, but might go from shift to shift. So these flags are put up by the mechanics. They can only be taken down by the mechanics. They can't be taken down by management or the local switch crew that wants access to that track. Here we see the flag is down. Now note that the flag is on a hinge attached to the tie, and this can be modeled, and I'll show you how to do that. But the flag being down indicates that there's no more personnel working on these cars or on the tracks. and it's okay to access this and tie on and couple in and switch out the cars that they deemed ready to pull. You have a clean, clear area. You'll notice there's no clutter. Everything is organized away from the track until needed and ready to be utilized. You will see a lot of space around both sides of the cars for them to drive machines, trucks, and anything else they'll need for doing repairs on these large freight cars. Now, the track is covered in dirt and it has concrete pads, and the pads are there to assist these hydraulic jacks that lift the cars up. Covered in dirt up to the railhead means no tripping. It's easy to move tools and machines. You can drive right over the tracks. There is no ballast in the rip track. So it's great to look at this. And when we're going to get to the modeling section, we'll point that out. That it's class 5 dirt or walkable sand and gravel. Another safety is the car moving. If the handbrakes are broken, they're going to use these wheel chocks. And note the handmade homemade handle for this. If you use it for repeated use, keep your fingers away from pinch points between the rail and the wheel. Usually, if there's a couple cars that you can couple them onto and use their handbrakes, all the better. Various supplies on the rip track. You're going to see wheels, brake shoes, safety appliances, couplers, drawbars, and more. We'll go over these wheels quite a bit. Notice that these have gears on them. I'll talk about those a little bit later on in this clinic. Outside storage. So this is where you keep items that are weather resistant, the coupler knuckles, the wheels, brake shoes, pin lifters, anything that would be on the outside of the car, and anything that people just aren't going to walk away with or will be damaged by the snow and the rain and things. More outdoor storage, you'll notice everything has an area and everything is away again from these tracks. You can see the tanks of the various gases used for weldings. You can see the shelving down there having hatches for hoppers and the different pallets and everything. But it's all in an area and it's all in its own, design, but it's kept away from the track that is the rip track itself. Wooden pallets. Now here we have a wooden pallet of new knuckles. Notice they're all rusty. No paint's not allowed by the FRA because paint could hide defects. The wood pallet keeps the knuckles out of the mud, the snow, and the rain. You see one's kind of rolled off for being used, but mostly it's kept on these pallets until they're needed and kept them accessible where they don't have to pull them out of the debris around them. Metal racks. You'll see a lot of these different racks. These are used to store longer items. Here we see cut levers for cushion drawbar equipped cars. These are trombone style, they call them. And this also just keeps them out of the snow and the mud and the dirt for the mechanics to easily grab and replace them on a car that needs a little attention. Longer racks will hold the metal shapes. Here's some sheet metal in L's and I-beams and flat steels. They can use for fabrication or use for reinforcements. And we'll talk about this in the next section. And then all metal benches. These are used for heavier objects, or here they're using it to store wooden wedges for re-railing a single car. The mechanics of the rip track are also responsible for helping re-railing like single car or single wheel or a single truck that happens in the yard. They're very good at this. So they keep their supplies over here dry and out of the rain and the mud. Metal bins. Here we have some new Cobra brake shoes. They've arrived in a cardboard box, which would probably deteriorate after a good storm, Midwest storm. So they put them in these metal bins, and it seems to have a pickup truck gate similar to that. They can lower the gate and push in a new cardboard box of brakes when this one is empty. And the metal ribbed baskets. These are painted on the outside, really rusty on the inside. Also, look for these in the next section. I'll bring these up. These seem to be the preferred method for storing anything that's not real specific. You'll see these bins all over the railroad in different applications for even for the track guys and things, but the mechanics like using them to put all their excess parts in there that they don't really have a use for yet. And the bins here you see are raised. So when they put the brake shoes in there and the other things, they can bring them right off a truck or they can forklift them in there. Behind, you can see some storage tanks and they have a railroad logo. That's a good thing to add, or a safety motto you could put on them: safety first. Storage shed. An old container put out there at a door, a walk in door, makes a great outside storage shed. On the left, you can see the new garbage can holder, the bright yellow one. Get the garbage up out of the mud and the snow. Safer to pull it out then. But this container, you probably couldn't even find who the previous owner was. It's so faded and rusty, just waiting for someone to model it. Steel and scrap bins. Now, these are kept for metal and other types of recyclables. These can be owned by a local scrap company. Alter's one up here in Minnesota. A lot of modelers use a gondola. They're not going to do this. The track space in the rip track is too valuable to have a gondola sitting there waiting to be filled and taken to some scrap dealer. So they'll just use these roll off bins, and they're much better suited for this purpose. Tanks for liquid or welding supplies, also stored outside, marked with placards. Here you see it's got a concrete base to keep it from sinking into the mud and the snow. There might also be warnings: no smoking in this area, etc., etc. So back to the wheels and storage. The wheels are stored nearby, and they're usually on some old rails buried in the dirt, and maybe some wooden runners. But this keeps them from sinking into the dirt. And you'll see these all lined up, and you'll see they're rusty because the wheels can't be painted either. But they have the shiny journal boxes on their journal bearings on them. So a difference in wheels: freight cars still use a variety of sizes, and this is very eye-catching. Probably have a 36-inch wheels, 33-inch wheels, and the 28-inch wheels used on auto racks and double stack cars. Here you see them stored on the buried rails. Now, we showed you the ones with the gears on them. Those are for locomotives. And these are stored over here just due to convenience. Where the locomotive facility is, there's no room to keep the wheel sets stored over there. It's a minimum of space on the other side of the river. And then also, if an engine out in the field needs an idler axle or something like that, they can pick it up here and take it to the engine on whatever spur they set it out due to a locked up wheel set. Once again, the wheels are rusty. There's no paint, FRA. The roller bearing journals look fresh, and you can still see the white tags still on the wheel sets there. So remember these journals too, also for the next section. This will all lead into how to model a rip track on your layout. Here we see drawbars on those metal shelving units again. Entire drawbar assemblies, and then note the different sizes and the variety of the colors of rust. So now let's talk about the actual track details. These are items that set apart a rip track from other yard tracks, and you'll notice these right away. Now, one of these are these concrete pads. There's usually more than one, and they're spaced more than one car apart. This is so the crews can work on multiple cars at the same time. They can work on one end of a south car and then the other end of the car that's north of it. These concrete pads make a great place for your cars to be spotted. Usually the crews will want to spot them over the pads or just next to them so the mechanics can pull or push the car to exactly where they need it. Now, once again, notice how clear it is all around the tracks. There is no clutter, no debris. So here we see the two concrete pads are visible. And here's the perfect use of that, a portable hydraulic jack. And you've all seen that little writing on your model cars that say pull here, lift here, jack here. That's exactly what this is for. They can roll out the entire truck and work on it at that point. You'll also see a red flag. Usually the rip track is a stub end. They'll need a red flag, tell the crews not to shove any farther. And you'll also see the Hayes wheel stops to physically stop the car from rolling off into the dirt at the end of a rip track. Machines. They're going to be using all sizes of forklifts and car movers. There is no trackmobile available at the rip track in South St. Paul. They will use these two larger forklifts or front end loaders to nudge and pull the cars where they need them to go. So the various forklifts, these are, you'll see the nearest one is used to carry a portable workstation. And the rear one with that long flat tongue and the triangles, that's where he'll lift up wheel sets. And I'll show you that. The axle will fit perfectly in those grooves. So each one will do different duties, but they can change the attachments on them. And here we see that case with an actual set of wheels going to be added to a new set of trucks. They can carry it around, they can move heavy objects, and they can move the freight cars themselves. And once again, the flat gravel makes this able to drive anywhere they need it to go. Other machines will be mobile lift platforms. You can reach the top of the auto racks, the top of high cube box cars, cars that have no roof walks, larger lumber racks. Move this into place and you can get to the damage on the top of a car or reach it safely. So this also would be at the rip track. Neat little machine. Now here's the other attachments. So they'll need plows and graders for the winter season and also to smooth out the dirt after many rains, and the machines will put grooves and things in there so they're not piling up the dirt where the freight cars will derail or everybody's tripping on it. So they will use these various times throughout the year to keep the area smooth and clear of debris and clear of snow. Portable workstations. This is a workstation that's moved out by that forklift. You can see an umbrella to protection from the weather. He's got toolboxes. They've got the hydraulic jacks. If this item was adding a sound to it, you'd probably hear the mechanic's radio playing in the background. Now, some machines are rentals, and this is a large tracked cat with a metal cutter attached, and it's going to be scrapping these damage covered hoppers. This will not be there all the time, but they'll just rent it out as needed. So they'll scrap the cars that are unfit to repair. If something was in a derailment, they'll wait for the insurance. And then the rip track makes a handy place to demolish these cars and haul away whatever is left of them to the recycling. Here we see one that there's not much left. They'll load it up in the bins, and nothing is reused. No one wants to put an old air brake assembly or, the wheels, all of that has been wiped out by insurance and it'll go for scrap value. Rip track is also handy for load transfers. Products sometimes need to be removed. This is a load of cheese. Now, the mechanics of this car broke and they're now loading it into trucks. They hired a third party to do the transfer. Has our mechanics, their time is too valuable fixing the cars for the railroad. This will also apply towards other commodities, and I'll show you here. So here's a transfer of even grains. This car was damaged beyond repair, but the commodity in it was not subject to any damage. And so here you can see they're transferring the grain from one hopper into a couple of these farm trucks. You can also see the effect of rain on the dirt, forming the puddles and the grooves. So the efforts to smooth this out after this will go back to the mechanics. But they'll do transfer of grains, they'll work on load shifting, steels of coil that need to be tightened, lumber that's coming displaced, flat sheets of steel that's poking out over the side. The rip track is where the loads will even get fixed as well as the cars. Then you'll see some vehicles. These are used to get to derailments and deal with other issues if cars not on the rip track. If they have to go replace a drawbar or a knuckle. And anybody who's worked for the railroad always knows when a drawbar gets yanked out, it's never on the correct side. It's always on a side where you can't move it that easily. They'll have a heavy duty trucks. These are used for moving wheels to the site and helping with derailments that require less than Hulsher. You can see some re-railing frogs on the front attachment to this truck, and you can see the large crane in the background to lift up wheels up and down and carry them in this truck, along with the hoses and the toolboxes. And then the railroad side of it, the wheel cars. Now, wheels can arrive via freight car or semi truck. And all of these wheels will probably not be unloaded here. They might go around if you're modeling a bigger railroad. One wheel car may unload a third at each rip track in the next town or so forth. But they'll take what they need and then put it back into the yard to be moved to the next destination. We'll take a quick look at the interior storage, items that should be kept inside. If you want to model an interior of this, we'll kind of take a peek here. You can see the forklifts and the garage door. And to the left, you can also probably see a Weber grill up there. Spring and summer, fall days, you can cook their own lunch. It's kind of nice. So the indoor storage is neat and organized. Note the pallet of water bottles. They have a forklift. It's handy for unloading them when they come shipped in and storing them inside. And then the crews can distribute them to the engines as they go out. This is very clean. The floors, there's no oil spills, no grease. Everything is in its place. I wish my garage was this clean. Portable generators are stored inside. Here you can see the wheels. They can move that around to wherever they need it. The umbrella for keeping the sun and the rain off. And then the portable workbench. That's also stored inside. But everything is clean and everything is organized and has a place to go. There's the portable hydraulic jack and then the toolboxes and the parts bins. Diagrams are on the wall. Gauges and parts that need exact sizes can be created from these. And once they're made, they can be put on there and stored to check all the defects and brake show movement and so forth. So now let's talk about modeling a rip track. I call this the best industry to model. And why? The variety of cars. And I say this over and over, any type of car can be found in the rip track. Here you're looking at a 4-truck heavy-duty flat car. Next to it could be a tank car corn syrup, and then an auto rack, a mechanical refrigerator, and a coal car. So only the interchange track can rival a rip track for variety of what can go on into it. So if you're going to model it, you want to find a location on your layout. So find a place near the yard. One track will suffice. Make sure to have some room on either side. Here's an early picture of the yard in Agate Bay of my split rock mining. And I was laying out the rip track. I wanted to put it towards the front of my layout as it was going to be a really eye-catching scene. And so here's the beginnings of mine. I added the concrete pads. Styrene will work. Below the rail height, add them outside the rails as well. So I got the pad going inside and outside and a small flangeway. And I have 2 of these. Of course, since I model ore cars, I get to put them a little closer together than someone who's modeling predominantly auto racks or high cube boxcars. The long black object in the front between the rails is one of my Katie non-delayed magnets. So I do operate my rip track. So I covered the area in dirt up to the rail height, and I made it level. I didn't taper it off. I made it level for the vehicles. And you can find your favorite dirt. I like using the clay that I find at baseball fields because there's not much shiny quartz in it. So it looks kind of like the local grade 5 dirt that you would find. Extra rails buried in the dirt. Use a scrap snap track piece. The ties are covered anyway. All you have to do is paint the top of the rails. Fill everything up to the top of the rails with the dirt that you're going to put on there. And this will be a nice place to put wheels for an eye-catching display. Track details. Blue flags at the track entrance. Make them movable and add to operations. You don't have to make them permanent, and you don't have to make them stand out or glow in the dark or lights. But I'm sure some people could add LED blue light flashing on there. I use the Details West, the MW451, and these can be raised or lowered as they come in 2 different parts. I use a tweezer to knock them down and to set them back up. But it's a great little detail part if you're an HO scale. And then a red flag and the wheel stops. I have yet to add the wheel stops. As I continue to add to my scene, that'll be the next bit to go in there. But I did put up a red flag so the crews know that's the end of the line. So the detail to your scene, you can be a real eye catcher. And I'll show you what I did. And here's someone's got a hydraulic jack and a cone and a board. I don't know if they're adding detail or they were a little bored. But you can see the detail of the concrete pad and what you're going to want to add around it. So for the wheels, to make them look better, I add these axle bearing caps, these BC 244s from Detail West. Add those to my scrap plastic wheel sets I swapped out when I put in metal wheel sets. Paint the wheels a rusty color, and then leave the caps black. If you're ambitious enough, you can put the little white sticker on the wheels. But have at least one section of track with some wheels that are ready to be put on cars that need change out. Now, Details West and others makes these great details. These are HJ450s for the hydraulic jacks. And I painted these yellow to stand out. And then you can see the blue hydraulic jack and some Woodland Scenics repair parts with the hoses and other things such as that. But the hydraulic jacks are on the concrete pads, and it helps you make a little flashier scene towards the front of your layout. Metal racks. I got these. These are nice set of laser cut details from Mine Mount Models. They make them in different lengths, and they serve a great purpose. They go together easy, they paint up well, and they look pretty much just like the racks you'll find in any storage area. I use styrene shapes to simulate the basic steel pieces. Some I-beams, flat steel, L girders, paint them a rusty color, cut them different lengths, and you're ready to insert them on your layout. Here's the metal bins. I found these on Shapeways. These are HO Flatcore Ford Motor Company bins. I was using these in another project. These are from Space Models by Barry Clement, but you get like 24 of them in there, so you can use these all over your layout. They really come in handy. I cut them apart. I sand the edges. You paint them. I used a clear coat. Then I found this neat little project called VMS Chip and Nick. You paint it on, and then when it dries, use a stiff brush and some water, and you remove what you want. And what is left leaves you chips and nicks to make it look like it's been used quite a bit. So it's a great one evening project. And most of the details on my rip track were one evening projects. They were just something I can keep adding to bit by bit when I have the time and I have the materials. Now, animation is a really good eye catcher, and I modeled a 16s, so I wanted an oxygen acetylene gas welder. And engineering this N8064B is a LED driver, and I have this simulated on here to make it look like I have some workers going, and I'll show you how this goes here. There you can see he lit up his torch, started adding the right mix of oxygen and acetylene, and then gets to welding. And this is pretty much the view that an operator would have looking down on there. So I put the welder simulated on the back of the car. As these guys, they've rolled out the trucks. They're working on the bolsters, the wheels, and then it goes off. And it's on a timer, and I've hooked this up to a battery. And so the LEDs are hidden under the car, and I've used a multi-purpose adhesive and attached them to the dirt. And then there's an on-off switch, and it's just a small battery. And so when I have operating sessions or visitors, I'll turn it on, and when it's over, I just shut it off, and I get a little animation in my rip track. The wheel car. Now, Tichy Train Group makes a great wheel car. I use this as an opportunity to scratch build a car for my rolling stock certificate in the achievement program. So the car here is scratch built, and then I use the Tichy wheels portions for the top. And that came out really well. And I store this over near my rip track. I have a receiving track on the far side that I'll put box cars and the wheel car and things. And it serves various other departments that deal with daily maintenance. And then add people and trucks. Show the workers doing their chores, setting up for future repairs. I'd probably like to add one of those portable workstations on there and possibly a forklift that would be appropriate for the late 1960s. And then moving your wheel sets, like I said, some neat machinery around the area, and kit bash them. So do your research, find out what your era and your part of the country would use, and it would make another 1 or 2 evening project that you could create. So for the last portion, we'll talk about operations, and we're going to talk about how to add operations to model your rip track. So how does the prototype operate on a rip track? The system is very simple. I'm going to tell you this. It is a handwritten note. Here you can see my perspective as the engineer. I've assumed the position here, and I'm waiting for my switchman to look over the list and see which cars we're going to pull out and leave in there. So a prototype track list. This is a list of coal cars that have been inspected by the FRA. You can see they found 2 that have bad orders. highlighted them. Now we're going to try and move these to the rip tracks because they'll have to get the work on them that has been written down and sent in a note to the mechanics. And this is at the end of the shift. This is what the car department issues on their handwritten note. This is what we look at as a train crew. You'll see the date, and then you'll see the car and reporting marks. We'll see if it's a load or an empty, and a simple OK means we can pull it. BO means it'll have to leave for tomorrow. On the right-hand side, you see the LRS 3623. Now that has a specific note. More work is needed. So it says don't move that one. And then the car behind it is on hold. The T-box may be fixed, but we're still going to leave it because we don't want to move that LRS till they get a chance to work on the wheels. So then this list is put into a file holder attached to the wall where the industry job crew will find it. And the job YSP 68 works at a Hoffman, comes on duty the second shift. So when they come on duty, as the repair people are done fixing these cars, and they'll put that list in there for them, and then we'll pull it out like the previous slide, and we'll see the cars that we have to pull and the ones we have to leave. The ones that go in there will be designated on our switch list or by the yard master. They will tell you where the bad order cars are in the yard for that crew to go collect. So how do we simulate this operation with all the various types of car rating systems? So let's look at the three main types. Here we are on Split Rock. We have the switchman. He's got his list ready. He's got his brakeman, and they're going to spot up the 840 into that rip track. So the three main types, car card, switch list, and tab on car. These can be easily modified for rip track service. Now remember, rip track can receive any type of car. I hope I've said that before. So here we'll go. We'll start with the tab on the car as we use on the Split Rock. Tab on car, assign a bad order color tab or pin. I pull the regular pin and replace it with one I have painted pink. When the car is repaired, I replace the pin original color. The blue flag is then lowered. So these two cars were bad orders and spotted. Then the next operating session, I'll replace the pins, and the crew can go in there and pull those. And then while the blue flag's down, they can spot any more bad order cars that have been placed with a pink pin in them. Car cards can be easily adapted. Just add a colored slip of paper into the waybill slot. This means it must go to the rip track. Then just remove it when repaired. And if you can only pull the cars with the bad order slips removed. These are some car cards and waybills I received from Joe Binish on his wonderful layout, very detailed. And this is a simple way to put these in there. So the flat car and the gondola are still in there and they're bad order, and they're saying go into the rip track. And you can just place these in various cars that'll fit the needs. Now you can detail these tags as much as you want. If you like detailing your car cards with the loads and things, you can say what's wrong. Lift pins, got a shifted load, and even a transload. We'll look at that reefer. So that might involve something else and need to be placed, that car, in a specific area of the rip track where trucks or somebody else could get at it to remove the produce that is in that reefer car. And then if you're going to switch lists can be handwritten to serve the rip track. Just add bad order and then near the reporting marks, and your conductors will know that, okay, when I'm done with this, I have to switch it over to that track. So here's a model switch list program, and we've just handwritten it in there. This is a switch list generated from Dan Dose's Minnesota commercial layout. And here we see this TT&I steel coil car. And when they pull that car and they take it back to Midway Yard, it has to go to the rips due to a pin lifter. Here we see a different type of list, but also it's still just handwritten. And there's the cars that you're pulling from Viking Industries. It's a steel middleman down there on the Hennepin line, and the DT&I car has a bad pin lifter. So when it gets back to Midway, the crew knows where that one has to go. And the KISS method, if you just have these switch lists like this, you can just write it in there. Notify the yard master that you got one bad order for the rips. When you hand that over to the lead job, when they're kicking out the cars, they'll send that one to where the rip tracks will have access to it. So now some tips. Do not put rolling stock that actually needs your attention in the rip track. Simulate the repairs only. The cars that need your attention, find a place off your layout where your operators or guests, or you can put them and leave a note that says, this needs work on the coupler, on the trucks, on the height, or any other notes. But don't put those into the rip track that you're modeling. And also, do not have your lead job work the rip track. This is kind of my personal preference. The rip track will be pulled and spotted once a day, usually by a second shift. The lead switcher's time is too valuable to take away pulling and spotting in the industry. I see this a lot on layouts that I go operate on, and it just doesn't hold true to the prototype. So the job of pulling the rip track, you can work with the lead job to swap out the pulls and spots. So in our yard, the industry job would pull the cars that have been repaired, hand them to the lead job for sorting, and the lead job would pull out the bad order cars, hand them to the industry job to spot into the rip track because it's a facing point spur. So there is some difference in there, but don't have your lead job take time to do this, as the time in yards is not compressed as it is with the rest of your layout. And then there's some things that you won't see on a rip track or in the general area. And as we're looking at here, you're going to see track department equipment, signal equipment parts, loose ties, rail spikes, tie plates, any tripping hazards. The track department and signal department and the other maintenance ways will all have their own area designated by the railroad. Here we see the track department. They have spare switches, rail, joint bars, points, frogs, ties, everything, but it's far away from the working rip track or another yard. And then remember, any type of car can go on the rip track. Have I mentioned this? Yes. So only that interchange track can match the variety of car types that are seen in a rip track. Box cars, flat cars, tanks, milk cars, or cars cool, anything. It's a great industry to have. So don't just make it a scenic element. Treat it like the most valuable industry you have. I want to thank you for listening to me and watching. I hope you find a way to add a rip track to your layout and make it useful in operation. And if you have any questions, I might have an answer. So let me know what you want to talk about, and I will try to answer or find you a place to get an answer. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. Hopefully, speed's turned the desktop audio on, then you're not just looking at me talking. But my mouth moving and words not coming out. So we have Tom with us now. Thomas, can you
Hello.
speak?
I can
There we go.
speak now. You
Hi,
fixed me up.
we fixed it. Yeah, great. Fantastic video. Everyone really enjoyed that. So we've got a couple of questions there that we've got actually, and there's just a few more just popped in. that I'm just going to catch. So the first question is, at the rip track, would they remove any rust from cars? And if so,
No,
how?
no, they wouldn't go after the rust unless it was structurally hampering the car. They don't remove the rust or the graffiti or anything. They don't have time for that, and they couldn't charge anyone for that. So rusty cars would just get fixed unless it was structural damage.
Okay. Would one railroad ever use another railroad's rip track?
They might if they need something, a tool or a type of lifting material that a smaller railroad in the same town, and there's the great big BNSF or CP, they'll ask, can we bring this over to yours and have your heavier tools, heavier lifters, move something on or off or shift it. So it could happen. I wouldn't say it's not going to happen.
So on a rip track, why do they not just put a concrete pad over the entire area? Wha-
Probably for cost and deterioration. Where I'm on upper Midwest, it's just simpler to use smaller pads, and if one of them really gets damaged, they can just put in another 8x8 pad rather than jackhammer out the entire way. The class 5 gravel is easy to plow and move around and smooth. It's just more cost efficient.
So that's actually the next question is, do they keep a road roller or a steamroller or anything to grade the dirt?
They have the front end loader and with various attachments, and they'll use the, I suppose, the scoop and then tilt it down and drag it across and level it out the best they can with that. But they don't have a specific grader or a steamroller. That would be too costly to sit around to use twice a year.
And we got a question from Facebook. Tim asks, what would be the average length of the rip track, and how much space on each side of the rip track should somebody allow?
Um, Rib track can be any length. I would say ours holds 10 cars. They prefer eight, and they like eight so they can move them around. So if you had 10 cars, they can move the cars one car either way, and that would allow the space. So on your layout, if you have room for 5 cars, tell the max they can put in there is 3, and then the mechanics can move the car. That's
Okay, cool. Um, so how do modern rip tracks differ from rip tracks in earlier eras?
Modern ones are less labor intensive. You'll see a lot less people working. They'll probably be a lot smaller due to the nature of not needing to fix wooden cars, or transition cars. So I would think if you're modeling a rip track in an earlier era, you're probably going to see some structures and more human activity and a lot different supplies that's around them versus what you saw on our rip track.
Okay. Would a passenger car ever go to the rip track?
No, not for freight. If unless it was they couldn't move it and needed a wheel, but passenger cars would have their own area in a coach yard. I would think anything that would have to do with the passenger cars before Amtrak would go to a coach yard.
Okay, and they had a similar concept or shops or something?
Right, and they had a lot more things set up to work on passenger cars, to work on the steam lines, disc brakes, a lot more, different materials and machines to keep, window glazing, like, because we would, broken window, we'd never have that or anything. So I would say keep the freight and passengers separate.
Cool. Um, questions? Any more questions coming in before we talk about something a bit different for a sec? So, for all you NMRA members out there listening, this arrived in Orkney today. This is the April um, NMRA magazine for April 2021. Um, and Thomas, you have an article.
Yes.
Is the Great Split Rock Mining Company, and this article happens to be on out of service track. So I see another NMRAx clinic in the future on this topic, hopefully. And it's a great 6-page article. For those that don't subscribe to the NMRA magazine, you can see here all the great content that we have, the great kind of articles from the best that we have, such as Thomas and stuff like that. So thank you very, very much, Thomas, for your clinic today. It's been fantastic and really interesting for most folk, and we will as soon as we can get that up onto YouTube. But for now, hello. I have a little person coming saying hello. For now, we'll say thank you very much, and we will what's the word? Clean down the studio for the next presenter. COVID protocols and all that, and we will get our next presenter in for you all, and we'll start at the top of the hour. So thank you very much, Thomas.
Thank you,
see you
Gordy.
soon.
Thank you, Speed. Thanks everyone for watching.
Okay, is it open? Okay. Hey everyone, we're back here with Drake. This is Gordy from the NMRAx team. So Drake, our next presenter is an author, photographer, and used to be a university professor. His model railroad interests include realistic structures, signage, passenger and freight operations, especially the creation of effective visual and written model railroad paperwork from system maps to timetables to crew instructions. He's a tireless fan of the Denver and Salt Lake Railroad, and so we welcome Mr. Drake Hokanson. Hey Drake,
How's
so
everybody?
let's,
How's everybody doing today?
I think they're doing all right. We've got quite a few folks watching the stream, and
Good.
let's get it going. So you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah.
Click on share.
Let's see here. Yeah. Okay. I don't have it shown big. Alt tab. There we go. Whoop. I don't know what you're seeing. There we go. How's that? This. Okay. Okay. Everybody seeing the PowerPoint? Are people seeing the PowerPoint? Okay, good. So welcome everybody. Thanks for your patience. It's a nice rainy day in western Wisconsin along the Mississippi River. It's good model railroading weather. Too early to be outside doing very much, but we'll get out when the weather allows. So we're going to look a little bit at working on passenger cars today, some enhanced detail and smooth operation. And I'm primarily going to look at Walther's passenger cars, largely because they have the lion's share of the market, and they have produced some really wonderful passenger cars in the last 20, 25 years that can really enhance our model railroad operations in some terrific ways. There are other good passenger cars out there, but I think the Walthers cars run the best and frankly provide the best value, and they have the most possible prototypes. As you can see, over the years they've produced quite a variety of cars, heavyweights, streamliners, Bud cars, Am Fleet, superliners, etc. The key thing that many of you may already know about Walther's passenger cars is that unless you get them when they come out, you may have quite a bit of trouble finding them. As is true of so many quality things in model railroading today, the things are short run. That is, they produce things and don't keep them in stock forever. So if there are particular cars you want, be on the lookout for them to be produced and get them while they're hot. Otherwise, you might miss out. Here's a good example of, I think, one of Walther's nicest passenger cars, or one of their nicest passenger trains. They've done an excellent model of Santa Fe's El Capitan with their double-decker cars that were the prototype for the superliner cars that Amtrak runs today. The plating on these cars is beautiful. They really look like stainless steel. They look good and they operate well. Just a good example. But now here you can see that they're sold out on the Walther's website. I checked it just a few days ago. In fact, they've been sold out for quite a while, and they're contemplating another run of these cars expected in September of 2021. That's hopeful, but it's no guarantee. Walthers will kind of evaluate what their advanced orders are likely to be and reproduce cars according to what the expected demand might be. And as you know from other manufacturers, they wait until they have enough pre-orders to actually build the cars. I don't know that Walthers is doing that as yet. So if you miss them, if you don't get them, eBay is probably your best friend. I have found a lot of things that I missed on eBay, and just a quick Google search recently for Walthers heavyweight HO scale passenger cars produced 193 hits. The more rare cars, of course, are going to go for more. The more common ones are going to flood the market. But with a little diligence, you can usually put together the train that you want to put together. So let's talk a little bit about prototype research. With these high quality, ready to run cars produced by Walthers, Rapido, Atlas, and some others, you can do some kind of neat things. Modifications to create many passenger cars for many trains. And with earnest kit bashing, some real dedication, it's possible to create exact replicas of specific cars and trains, which really motivates a lot of people to create some very specific trains that have never been specifically modeled. But I'm here to tell you, I'm not that guy. I love the work that people do to create every car with every window exactly perfect, but that's more effort than I'm frankly willing to put in on a hobby. I'm generally satisfied with close approximations of particular cars and trains. To get the flavor of a particular passenger train is really what I'm after. Thus, with some research in mind, you can put together pretty respectable contests. And here's a couple sources, and at the end I'll list these websites for you, and you can do a screenshot if you'd like, where I've done a lot of prototype research on passenger trains. This is I think it's American-rails.com that lists some good contests and some information, schedules, and so forth. This is passenger car photos. If you're looking for a particular passenger car that somebody ran at one time, this site may turn it up. And you might have some photographs of it in either good running condition or sitting in a scrapyard somewhere. This is passenger car photos, again, searching by name, by car name, which is a pretty good search function. And that will and railfan.net will yield some good photographs as well, by car name, by car number, by railroad, etc. And again, I'll have these URLs up at the end of my little presentation today. Utah Rails Net, particularly Union Pacific equipment, very good site showing a lot of their passenger equipment, including Union Pacific's heritage equipment that they run today. And then there's the Pullman Project, which, I think there's, 10,000 or so cars listed in the Pullman Project. I don't think it's being kept up to date anymore, but it's a really great resource if you're looking for heavyweight equipment. I've spent a lot of time poking through these Excel files. And then also the prototype historical groups are very important. Southern Railway is one of many, as I'm sure you know. Your favorite railroad probably has a prototype historical group that often has a lot of great modeling information, as well as passenger car contests. Walthers themselves does quite a bit of research on the trains that they produce when they produce their name trains. And their name trains are beautiful. They're not cheap, but they are really quite gorgeous. This is some of the information they produced for some of their Union Pacific trains, the cities of everywhere, as they were known for some time. You can pretty well put together the appropriate contests. And then, of course, there's the old-fashioned way. Those of you who like books like I do gather quite a few books and have the opportunity to page happily through a lot of information about your favorite railroads and favorite passenger trains. So with some information from the web and a couple of books, I was able to, with primarily Walther's cars, able to build a pretty respectable version of New York Central's Southwestern Limited that ran essentially from New York City to St. Louis. It was as far west as the New York Central got with passenger operation. And this represents the train in about 1950 to 55. It varied quite a bit depending on when you look at the consist, but a fairly respectable version. I don't have the locomotives on it right now, but baggage car here, RPO, 2 coaches, a diner, which is a Rapido diner. The C&O ran a run-through sleeper on the train for a while, and then 3 New York Central sleepers. These cars have lights, including the diner. It doesn't show up because the my 12-volt wall wart doesn't quite give it enough voltage to turn on the lights in the Rapido car. And here's a little darker image showing what the lights look like. We'll talk a little bit more about lights as we go along. One thing to point out about lights here is that in many cases the lights are pretty bright, brighter than a passenger train would look if you see an Amtrak train go by at night with its heavily tinted windows. But since most of us run in room light, more or less daylight room light in layouts, having the lights a bit brighter than would be prototypic actually works well because you can see the interior details pretty well. Now, we'll have more about that too as we go along. So ultimately, you can make some pretty nice passenger trains, whether you're doing prototype modeling or proto freelance or just simply flat out freelance modeling. This is a train I upgraded a bit for a friend, Ron Kofer, who runs the Lake Erie and Southern Railroad, a proto freelance railroad, a really freelance railroad that runs essentially from Cleveland to St. Louis. Walther's cars, detailed to a certain extent and painted appropriately for the Lake Erie and Southern. Ron is kind of the mainstay for the River Rail group of railroads here in the La Crosse, Wisconsin area. Another view from another spot on his layout with a streamlined train, the Twilight Limited that I worked on for him. So let's talk about details. Nothing I'm going to talk about today is revolutionary, but I have developed some techniques in working on these cars and improving these cars that I think enhance them quite a bit. Right out of the box, they look pretty darn good. You put them on the track and you can be done with them at that point. But I think with some attention to detail, they can really stand out and will stand up under very close scrutiny and look as good as anything anybody else produces, quite frankly. So let's start with the grab irons. Most of you who have Walther's passenger cars have been confronted with this little horror, if you will, in the box. It's the little plastic envelope with all those little odd pieces of bent wire that are supposed to be grab irons on your car. This is especially true with some of the older cars that you can get, frankly, for a pretty good price sometimes on eBay. And you're now given the task of installing your own grab irons, which I think adds considerably to the appearance of these cars. And it's not as difficult as many think. It's a little time consuming, but I've developed a couple methods that I think make it pretty possible. And I've probably put grab irons on 100 plus passenger cars, and I can do it fairly quickly, not without some frustration, but fairly quickly. The other techniques that I use. First off, some tools. These are 3 key tools in this project. From bottom to top, the bottom is a sharp scribe, and I think it needs to be sharpened in the close-up photo. But any sharp scribe will do, and I'll show you what it's for in a moment. Second, of course, in the middle is a Yankee style micro drill, This is really important for drilling those holes in those cars, and you may have to drill up to 20 holes in a car. And a standard vise, pin vise, is going to take you forever. This is a Yankee drill, such that as you push up and down on the knurled ring here, the screw design here in the spring will cause the bit to turn. And it's very precise, and I find it to be the best way to precisely drill holes for grab irons. I've tried multiple methods, including slow speed Dremels and all kinds of things, and find that this works far better. The scribe, well, I'll talk about that in a minute. I'll leave that. The top is of course a pair of clamping tweezers, which hold that damnable little grab irons in place while you maneuver them into the holes without them springing and flying across the room and disappearing forever, which certainly has happened to all of us. So here's the scribe. Again, I think it needs a little sharper end on it, and I sharpen it periodically. Walther says use a number 80 bit for drilling the holes. I find that's a little tight for getting the grab irons in. So I have kind of standardized on a 79 bit, number 79 bit, which works quite well. Just gives me a little bit more wiggle room, but the grab iron will still tend to stay in place as I insert it. The gripping tweezers, clamping tweezers, really make this job a lot easier. To try and maneuver these things around with a normal pair of tiny pliers or anything else is really pretty tough. I recommend this as a stopgap or as a way to get this part of the job done. Now I have a particular advantage here. Most of these passenger cars have several complex grab irons on the ends of each car. Some modelers I know just forego them and say, well, nobody looks at the end of the car anyway, but I don't know, maybe I got more time than good sense. So I tend to install them all. It's kind of a challenge. And I have a little advantage. I've got a secret weapon here. My workbench, well, first of all, it's very hard to work on the car end. You know, lock the thing between your knees or something and try and work on it. It's not very convenient. My workbench is an old film editing studio, and it had a light table in it. So I can pop out this piece of plexiglass, and I have a old magazine storage box that I put a chintzy plywood lip on, some craptastic carpentry. And what I have is now this well, if you would, where I can wrap a car in plastic, bubble wrap, shove it down into this well, which has a bottom in it, and I can bend over it on my workbench and work on it comfortably and conveniently. If there's a way you can do this, you might be able to build something that extends out from your workbench and clamps to it. That might be another option. If you're going to do more than a couple of these, it will save you enough time to be worth it. So again, you could build a box that you just use a couple C-clamps to clamp on the lip of your workbench, and that would suffice as well. But I really recommend it. An extreme close-up of one of the Walther's cars. The grab irons on all the cars go into holes that are dimples in the cast car body. You can see that there's essentially a bolt here and a dimple here where you're to drill your hole. Same here, a rivet or a bolt here, and a dimple where your hole for the grab iron is to be drilled, here and here as well. Some of those dimples are not that well formed. I mean, we're talking about a plastic casting process after all, and paint on top of it. The casting quality is very good, as you can see. This is an extreme close-up, but I go in on each of these and just simply make the hole a little bit more pronounced, so that when I go at it with my Yankee drill, I drill the hole in the right place, which greatly improves my satisfaction and my mood. Once those holes are drilled, I test fit the grab iron, and then I developed a little trick here. This is an old 35 millimeter film cap. Y'all remember those, don't you? And this, with a piece of cardboard folded on one side behind it, lifts it at an angle. And I dribble just a little bit of quick set ACC in here and dip the ends of the grab iron, each end into that, and then place it in the side of the car and hold it until it sets up. At times, for certain grab irons, I use this NMRAx applicator, and that works quite nicely as well. But sometimes it carries more ACC than I want. Speaking of tools, just for a second, this came from NMRAx, as did the Yankee drill. I'm pretty sure. I've had it for a long time, but I think NMRAx sells them. It's a really great little tool for all kinds of micro drilling projects. So here's a New York Central car. I noticed it's a little dusty in the photograph, but the grabs are installed now on the side, and I think it looks pretty respectable. As you install the grabs, I often use an X-Acto blade slid underneath them to gauge how far they stick out from the side of the car. People say that the thickness of a standard X-Acto blade is about how far those grabs should extend out from the side of the car. You don't want them mashed down onto the car, otherwise there's no point in putting them on. They look like they're cast on. And you don't want them sticking out unprototypically too far. So about the thickness of an X-Acto blade works real well. This is what they look like on the end of one of the New York Central cars. Again, you know, this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14 holes in the end of this car. So it takes a little time, but I think yields some nice results. Now, chances are good that these grabs on these New York Central cars would have been painted to match the car. I left them, mostly because I was indecisive. I left them, I weathered the car end, and I'll talk a little bit about that later, but I left them kind of bright as if they were stainless steel, because I liked the look of it, and they stood out a little bit more. Many of the grabs on the sides of cars, especially close to the vestibule where the passengers entered, would have been either chrome, probably chrome or stainless steel on many cars. So leaving them unpainted is fine. Enough about grabs. I think the basic principle is there. Let's get into this, to some of these cars a little bit, and see what kind of trouble we can get into here. Walther's cars have a pretty intriguing system of latches, if you will, that hold the roof onto the car side. And this is the lip of the latch that you're seeing here. The latch is disconnected, as is the whole roof side. And I find that my first line of offense is to take a fingernail and slide between the roof and the car side and try and pry this thing up a little bit so I can see where these gaps are in the car side, such that behind there will be one of these locking tabs. Once I ascertain that, I use one of these two tools to push inward and downward on that latch to pop the latch free. And I think on each side there are 5 or 6 latches. And that's why the roofs stay down so nicely. These are number 7 sharp. It's just a piece of metal there. And I try and use that one, but sometimes it's too thick to get in there, and I have to resort to a regular sharpened number 17 blade and shove in there and work it. And I'll be honest with you, with just ordinary styrene cement, I've never had one fail. It's almost as if they're designed to break and be re-glued, but there's a trick to it. It's like a lot of things. You play with it a little bit, you'll get good at it. But these two tools, number 17 blades, one cut off, ground off flush, and this one regular. Don't worry, you don't need that blade to be too sharp. You don't want it too sharp, but you just want to be able to get into that space. So the roof is off here on a passenger car coach. You can see the tabs here all along, and they fit here, and they click into these gaps, these little channels here. Not too tricky once you get used to it. If you're doing a bunch of these at once, I suggest you mark the inside of the car with the inside of the roof with the car name or type. It's easy to get the roofs mixed up, and they don't all fit one another. Don't ask me how I know that. So people, you got to populate these cars, right? They really look a lot better if you've got some passengers in them. And you don't need to buy the high-end Pricer figures. You can buy cheap ones, and I buy them in boxes of a couple of hundred, I think. And for instance, on eBay, just a quick search recently, 60 pieces of all seated HO scale passengers was 14 bucks. I think you can probably find them even cheaper than that. I know I bought a boatload for almost nothing. They don't have to be that good. and they can repeat as these do. You're going to scatter them around, and nobody sees them in that much detail anyway. So they can be pretty clunky. What you're looking for is the suggestion of people and a little dash of color to give you a sense that people are riding your trains. The other thing is that you don't have to fill the car up. I filled probably half or fewer of the seats. You'll notice the people are big enough, you probably can't put 2 in most seats anyway. But scatter them around and break up the color, and give it some visual interest. The other thing you can see here, and I didn't take any slides of this because it wasn't really necessary, I used some colored paper just to glue a few shades in here. Some cover windows completely, some come down part way. Pick a color that seems to match the prototype. Sometimes it's hard to find out what color shades a given railroad used, and I use some appropriate pastel paper sometimes just to give me a shade. Sleeping cars, again, you want a few passengers in them, just scattered around. Try and position some of the better ones near the windows. You can create some little scenes if you wish. One detail that I have seen nobody else do, if you've ever ridden many passenger trains, you know that along the corridors against the windows, there will be handrails. The Bud cars had them, Pullman Standards all did, a lot of the heavyweights did. There will be handrails along those sides. And I've used, I think it's 15 thousandths piano wire. Doesn't look very shiny in this photograph, but it has a little sheen to it. 15 thousandths piano wire, trimmed, cut to the appropriate length, and glued inside. Again, this is on the corridor side of a car. That adds just a tiny little detail that is remarkably noticeable when the car's on the track. You do notice little details like this. It doesn't have to be much. Now you notice I didn't talk about painting the interiors of these cars. I've done it on a few, and it's a very slow process, but I don't think it's necessary. If I was building contest models, perhaps, but I'm really just trying to build good passenger cars that run well and give you a good impression of passenger service. So anyway, the hand grabs along the windows in the corridor side of passenger cars. Also, of course, the bathroom windows in these cars would have been etched glass or some sort of translucent but not transparent glass. And the other day I was doing a car and realized I didn't have any more translucent sandblasted acetate. So I just took my rattle can of dull coat and sprayed a piece of plastic, thin plastic, and that gives me the correct kind of opacity to it. And then I trim these out and glue them into the windows. So here's kind of a before look at some interior details as I started to work on this car. And here's the after. The roof is still off, but you see the difference. Got some passengers here, some window shades, one completely blocking the window. And it's a real measurable improvement. This looks pretty empty, pretty unlived in, and that really is going to look a lot better. Just a few passengers, some window decor, etc. Let's talk about lights. I like lighted passenger cars, and Walthers makes or made LED lighting units, DCC or DC friendly lighting units for all of their passenger cars. Some of them are getting hard to find now, and eBay tends to be my source. And some of them Walthers still has in production. But if you've got cars and you plan to light them, I would look for these. I've tried other lighting units. I know people who build their own, but I find these to be reliable, and you can usually get them on eBay for about 15, 18 bucks each. Obviously, you should test them before you install it. That didn't work right out of the box. They go into the top of the car and are pushed down beneath some electrical tabs that run from the trucks and the frame of the car. It's a pretty sophisticated way to wire these. It works quite reliably. except I find that this is the sort of joint that over time kind of corrodes a little bit, and with low amperage, it tends not to work. So I've taken the expedient, I'm sorry this image is flipped around, it's the other side of a different car, is I just run a bead of solder, clean it up, run a bead of solder on these, and make a solder joint, and that ensures my electrical contact. This, I think, is kind of a weak spot in the electrical pathway. The other thing to bear in mind is that for some odd reason, the lighting units that Walters has built for their heavyweight cars don't really fit into the slots the way they're supposed to. These things click in, supposedly clip into some slots on top of the car, but these don't. So I just simply ran a couple of jumper wires from these tabs, these are the same tabs you saw in the other photograph, to the tabs on the light unit, and then just simply glued the light unit to the roof of the car. Very simple. I also like to get kind of carried away with lights. My model of the Santa Fe El Capitan, I thought, well, it's got that lovely number board and that lovely rear marker light. I really would like to see that lit up. And so I bought some LEDs, which there's a lot of places to buy them, and getting into the LED selection is probably beyond the scope of this clinic. But put a Pico red LED in this marker light, which I drilled out, and then behind the marker light, either Walters made an adapter for that, or I just put in an LED. I can't quite remember, but either way, you can easily run an LED from the circuit board up in the roof down to here, hide the wires a little bit, and glue the darn thing in. Similarly, on this New York Central car, I wanted these rear marker lights lighted. And this is kind of a special case. This car runs as the tail car in my Southwestern Limited, but it's a mid-train car when it runs in the New York Central's 20th Century Limited. Now, I've never had very good luck with those little magnetic reed switches. Maybe some of you have. I got bad karma or bad magnetism, I don't know which. So in this particular car, because I wanted to be able to turn these lights on and off, I installed a small on-off slide switch in here that controls just that circuit. Now, I don't have it set up so I can turn other lights off in these cars. They're just on all the time. There's track power. You might want to think about switching them on and off. People put decoders in them. There's all kinds of ways you can go, but I'm kind of the keep it simple approach. I'm going to talk a little bit about weathering. I'm not going to go into it in great detail, but I'm going to show you the difference here a little bit. Passenger cars should be weathered. The car on the left is weathered. The side sheets I don't weather at all. I figure in the eras that I like to model, they kept them nice and clean. But the ends got dirty, and of course the underframe got dirty. Now this shows it looking more rusty than the actual. I think for some reason my camera kind of boosted that, but I use a mixture of simply diluted grimy black, about 1 to 1 with water or alcohol, to just kind of paint the trucks a bit, to just weather them down a bit. And I put a little rust on them as well. And I use that same mixture in an airbrush with the sides and the top roof masked off, so I have access to the ends and the underbody, and I spray with my airbrush to lightly weather the ends. I think it's particularly noticeable right here where the diaphragms meet. Unweathered here, that kind of shiny black plastic and a little grimy black overspray weathers it adequately, so that I think that really makes a big difference. The shiny black plastic doesn't do a thing for me. And then some underbody weathering again with the airbrush. So what I tend to do is I have a bunch of passenger cars, and I'll mask them all up and get the airbrush out and do them all at once. So that's why I wasn't able for this clinic to show you what that looks like. But you can see the difference. This is one of those cars. You saw this picture before with some weathering on the end. This is about the way they would normally look. And another thing to remember, you can't see it very well, but you can in another photograph. I taped off the vestibule, the piece of masking tape when I sprayed this with the airbrush, so as not to dirty the door. You know that the car stewards would be keeping the door clean, but once I pulled the tape off, I get after the face plates of the diaphragm with a sanding stick or something, maybe some paint, to kind of scuff it up, because they always looked beat. I think there's another picture here. Yeah, this is Santa Fe El Capitan, lightly weathered. I wanted to not weather the door because that would be kept clean for the passenger's sake, but scuffed up the strike plate on the diaphragm after I was done with the weathering. I think it looks pretty sharp. Works pretty well. And so just for fun, for a break, a couple of cars in C2, if you will. These again are on Ron Cover's LE and S, but some of his passenger cars that I worked on here a while ago. Now I'm going to go kind of quickly here because I got started late, which I apologize for. But car weight, this is the NMR recommendation, and for an 85-foot car with their recommendation, it would come in at 12.25 ounces, which is pretty damned heavy. Walther's cars out of the box are generally about 7.5 ounces. They tend to run pretty well at that. There's one car I had that didn't run very well, and I did everything I thought I could do to it, and I finally just kept putting weight in it until it ran well. I think it weighs probably close to 12 ounces. But otherwise, unless you're running really long passenger trains, I find that if you weight them a little bit, that's fine, but you may not even need to do that. Minimum radius, Walther says 24. I wouldn't do it. I say 30. Number 4 yard switches will work, even with 6-wheel trucks, if they're good and level and well maintained with no S curves through the switches. The trucks pivot pretty well, but I wouldn't try and run them on 24 and expect them to operate very well. 30 inches, they don't look very good, but they will generally get around if your track is pretty good. Tuning them up. Walther's trucks are really kind of an unusual design. The 4 screws that you see here hold the truck side frames to the bolster that goes across the middle. You want that to be a very square H. If it's not, you're going to have a lot of trouble with it. One thing you do is, of course, put the truck on a piece of glass and make sure that there's no wobble to it. That is like a table with one leg shorter than another, that you want all 4 wheels to be touching the glass at once. But you also want to make sure that H is not skewed in some ways. And I've run into a few that were assembled kind of oddly, and they were more shaped like the red lines are here. You can adjust them a bit, loosen the screws a bit, and straighten them out, and that will sometimes make a real big difference. You want to make sure that the wheels are in line. We've all seen truck trailers going down the highway where the rear wheels on the trailer are bolted on a little crooked, and the trailer cants down the highway. You don't want to do that. They won't track well at all. So that's one thing to check right away as to operating these cars. Make sure that the truck sits level on a piece of glass, and make sure that the H is square. And did I mention you should check the gauge? Of course you could. Right out of the box, check the gauge. They're usually pretty good, but don't take a chance. There's another peculiarity with these trucks that's worth thinking about. Here's the side of a New York Central car, and here's a close-up. I don't know what this is in the truck. It looks like a lubricator or a for the brake system, but this little nibbin right here frequently will catch on the underside of the skirt, and this is a common problem. This will derail a lot of passenger cars with this style truck, even on even 30-inch curves. So I've taken to, you can't see it real well here, but I've taken to taking an X-Acto knife and kind of carving out the inside of that skirt so that it's at least shaped such that as this truck pivots, it will tend to ride over that. If it's just a square edge, it'll be blocked. You don't want to cut to the outside, or you'll leave a big gap in your skirt. So here's the skirt. So the inside of that skirt, where it's not seen, you want to carve that out a little bit so it has a little more room and kind of a ramp, if you will, to ride up on. see it a little bit here. I might even cut that one a little bit more if I have any trouble with it. That's a common problem with these guys. So there we are. I ran a little fast here just so that I could get done. Though we started a bit late, but I'm happy to. I like to see happy operators running passenger trains on different railroads, and I'd be happy to entertain any questions that people might have. We've got a little bit of time here, and I can go back to any slides people want. And the next slide I'll put up is some of those links that I showed you earlier. Please take a screenshot if you'd like. My email address is there as well, and if you'd like to contact me directly, I'd be happy to visit with you. Thanks for being here. Questions?
Thanks, Drake. So I only see, guys, like, what's going on tonight? I only see one question at the moment, but some people pop some in the chat. If you're on Facebook, I think we're having a few problems with the Facebook stream, so I apologize, but if you go over to our YouTube channel, the stream is absolutely fine over there, so get yourselves over there. I can't even see any questions on Facebook at the moment. It's causing me some problems. Anyway, the question, Drake, is from Andy. Are there any easy ways of getting Wolfer's passenger cars to go around tight bends as well as the Cato cars do?
My short answer is probably not. Were I in a situation where my space was limited to very tight curves, I would probably build a freight-only railroad. The frustration level that I've observed on layouts that have very tight curves, trying to run full 85-foot cars, makes it not worth it, quite honestly. Atlas and some others in years gone by, Roundhouse has made some shorty passenger cars. You might try those. People have tried a variety of things. I think the Model Railroad Press has covered that a bit, but the railroads that I work on, I don't think there's anything less than 30 anywhere, and so it's not something I've had a lot of experience with. But the laws of physics seem to dictate that tight curves and long passenger cars just aren't a good combination.
Okay, cool. Don has just asked, could you just pop your links back up and just leave them up while we chat, and then maybe you do your share, and then maybe folk can see them. We can minimize the share, and then people can see us talking as well. Ask to rewind. Yeah, you can always rewind the YouTube video, but we'll just stick the slide back up for you because we've got a wee bit of time.
Yeah,
so we're kind like that, you see.
How's that?
Oh, that's fantastic.
Okay, great. Yeah, you'd rather look at that than me anyway.
Okay, we have another question from Ben. He says he's got some old Wolfer's cars with wheel brakes on them. Generally, are those a good idea in practice?
Well, it depends on how old. I mean, all of the trucks that I've worked with, the Walters trucks, have brake shoes on them, if that's what he's asking. And the brake shoes don't tend to interfere with much unless you have a particular clearance problem somewhere with the truck pivoting. I've never taken them off. If he's talking about the wheel brakes, the brake shoes on the Walters trucks, I've never had any trouble with them.
Cool. Okay. Any more questions out there, folks?
One other thing I'll point out while we're thinking about it is that after I work these cars up and get them in pretty good shape, I usually put just a tiny drop of oil on each axle end. It not only cuts down the squeak, which occasionally shows up in the trucks, but it also makes them roll more freely. It might even improve electrical contact, because the way the contacts are set up, each wheel is on the end of a plastic insulated axle, and each wheel is in contact with the side frame of the truck, which is in contact with those two screws on each side frame, which is in contact with a piece of brass on the underside of the car. It's pretty reliable. You'll get some flicker. If you want to get crazy and put in keep alives, that's something a lot of people have talked about, and I think would probably be a pretty good idea. The lights draw very, very little current, so you wouldn't need much of a keep alive, I think.
Cool. So yeah, Ben says the kit's from the 1970s. So
Okay. Yeah, anything that interferes, I'd either, and I'm not familiar, well, the 1970s, yeah, I'm not familiar with those cars. I think all of mine are post 1997 or so. If the brake shoes tend to cause any interference, I'd at least cut them back, that is, grind them back a bit. Anything that's likely to cause you trouble will, let's just put it that way. But I leave every detail on that I can. I don't want to take off anything that would degrade the look of the car, if possible.
okay, cool. David Wolf is absolutely spot on. N scale, Z scale are very useful if you don't have a lot of space and you want to run passenger equipment. Drop the scale.
I concur. Yeah, go to N scale. There's a lot of good passenger cars in N scale now, and you know, I don't know. Can you put grab irons on N scale passenger cars? Maybe it won't matter. I don't think you need to. There's some beautiful trains.
Well, we us N scalers do put arms on our snowmen.
Well,
here is a snowman right here with an N scale carrot for his nose. So yeah, you put wire grab irons. I don't know if you've seen the scale train stuff, but scaletrains.com, Gevos and stuff come with grab irons on the roofs and everything of the locomotives. So yeah, grab irons in N scale is a totally cool.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Rapido's made brake gear in N scale cool now. So I think you kind of it's getting more and more detail. Andy Ambrose comments and says, beware of the yellow snow. If people want to go to the Gordy.uk blog, you'll understand what the yellow snow reference is, because my layout's set in Wisconsin in January and there's lots of snow. So
good.
All right, cool. You can put grab irons on both N and Z. Yeah, good luck putting it on Z. I think that the gauge of the wire that you would need to use for that would be pretty difficult to keep it in shape. If Big Fingers picked up that model, I think you might squish them. But yeah, good luck to anyone who does that. Okay, I think that's. Oh, well, one more question just flew in. Metal wheels. Would you replace your car wheels with metal wheels if they were plastic?
Yes. Freight cars, passenger cars, metal wheels only. The difference in operation, the likelihood of derailment goes way down with metal wheels. But be careful. I run into some metal wheels now and then in replacing wheels in freight cars or passenger cars where they're a little out of round or they have nicks in the flanges. So inspect them before you install them, but always metal wheels. I just think it's a bit of work, it's a bit of expense, but if you want your equipment to operate, it's really essential.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I think, folks, that is all of the questions out there for some. Somebody's just said they struggle to put the grab irons on in O scale.
Well, I understand.
Well, I think that's us. With all the questions, Drake. Thank you for joining tonight and this afternoon in the States and sharing your know-how with everybody on the stream. Hopefully we'll have you back to do another clinic in the future. But we'll sign off for now and say thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Be safe.
Good afternoon, or is it good night or good morning? Our next presenter has been has been a railroader since before birth and a modeler since the age of 5. He models the Baltimore and Ohio and the Colorado Midland Railroad in HO scale. While working as a small town station agent for the Missouri Pacific Railroad in Nebraska, he learned to play guitar, and he and his guitar, Ivanhoe, have been all over the USA playing at train shows, conventions, and fan trips. But enough talk. Let's hear it if he's willing to share some of it. We welcome all the way from Texas, Tom Greco.
Hi, thank you, Lloyd, and good afternoon, good evening to everybody. I am Tom Greco from Duncanville, Texas. That's suburban Dallas. This is my guitar, Ivanhoe. He's named for Ivanhoe, Colorado, at the top of the Rocky Mountains on the Colorado Midland Railway. As Lloyd said, when I was station agent for the Missouri Pacific, I used the time off in the station to learn to play guitar. And so maybe it was natural that I would gravitate toward railroad folk music. Beautiful Sunday afternoon on the East Coast. It was September 27th, 1903. And the fast mail of the Southern Railway is making its way south from Washington, D.C. to Atlanta, Georgia. The train was 4 cars of mail, no passengers carried. The railroad was paid quite handsomely to forward this this dedicated train. And conversely, if the train was late, they were fined for the tardiness. So this day, fast mail is just over an hour late leaving Washington. Due to late connections from Philadelphia and New York. The first crew changes at Monroe, Virginia, which is 165 miles south of Washington. And there, a fella gets on the engine named Joseph A. Brody. His co-workers called him Steve, perhaps in honor of a sort of an Evel Knievel type of fellow that was about in the land in those days. He jumped off the Brooklyn Bridge and lived to tell about it. That may have been a commentary about how Joseph Brody ran trains. However, he got on the fast mail. The first stop was Lynchburg, just a few miles down the track, Lynchburg, Virginia. As the Southern Railway approaches Danville, Virginia, the Dan River on a long, easy grade. It was called White Oak Mountain by the locals. Not really a Rocky Mountain style of mountain, but a mountain to those people. And the track came down to the river, took a sharp turn, 90-degree turn over Stillhouse Trestle, paralleled the Dan River for about a mile, and then turned across the river and into the station. The speed limit on that trestle was 15 miles per hour. However, eyewitnesses of the day tell us that the fast mail, in an effort to make up some of the lost time, came down White Oak Mountain any place between 40 and 90 miles an hour. Whatever the speed, it was too fast for the trestle. The front wheels of the engine popped off the rail on the sharp curve. The engine and all 4 cars plunged off the trestle into the ravine below in a pile of steel and steam and splintered wood. The death toll was catastrophic even for those days when accidents were more common. Of the 17 people on the train, tragically 11 lost their lives, mostly mail clerks in the railway post office cars. But the wreck became a fixture of folk music, and perhaps the most famous song ever written, most famous, if you haven't guessed it, is the number of the fast mail. The fast mail was train 97 on the Southern Railway, and the song is, of course, The Wreck of Old 97. One Sunday morning, I was standing on the mountain, just watching the smoke below. It was rolling out from a tall, thin smokestack down on that southern railroad. 97 was the fastest train the South had ever seen. But they ran so fast on that Sunday in September, the death toll was 11 at the sea. Handed him his orders at Monroe, Virginia. Said, Steve, you're way behind time. This is not old 38, this is old 97. Said, put him into Spencer right on time. So he turned around and said to his big greasy fireman, hey, shovel on a little more coal. 'Cause it's when we cross that White Oak Mountain, you can watch old 97